I'll be talking about governance and entity selection today. So another thrilling topic, but something that I feel very deeply about because there are lots of considerations in your life and your plans that you need to consider in making these decisions. I'm a partner at Ballard Spar. I did my undergrad here at the University of Utah. I'm from Los Angeles. I am licensed in California, Utah, and in DC. But my practice is national in nature. I have a number of clients all over, and I touch anything related to business. And so I help companies early on in this stage and throughout their life cycle. We don't have much time. I do have a lot of information on my slides. I learned in business school that that's not the thing you're supposed to do. So if you have additional questions or something as I click through quickly, just please let me know. A number of things that we'll look at today. Entity selection. This matters in the jurisdiction that you're in, the different state, what your goals are in the future, and different protections that you should look at. Capital formation, how to raise money, which forms you'll be raising money. A number of the people on your agenda today are dealing with that. And then exits out of the entities that you've decided to form. So we'll jump right into entity selection. This might seem familiar to a number of you. A number of considerations throughout what you're trying to do. You have a beautiful business plan. You're ready to get started. You're looking into the future on what you'd like to do. All of these thoughts and considerations come into the entity that you end up choosing. Liability benefits, alter ego protections are important. Legal entities are formed for multiple reasons: to create the governance for your venture, how you work together, also to provide legal protections, to protect you from liabilities in the future, to keep the liabilities at the entity level or to come down to the individual. How many partners you have. We'll talk about governance in a few minutes. Your board of directors, how you'd like to progress with your company and how it will proceed. All of this matters in the entity that you end up selecting and what your goal is. And so you can see a number of these things are all future oriented. You have to progress. You have to look forward to see where you want to be in a number of years when deciding which entity and where you would like it to be formed. A few other things to consider. I mean, taxes are really big. They'll be up there. Different tax elections and valuations will come into play. These are distinct considerations depending on what you would like to do and what your plan is for the future. So what are the different types of entities that you can consider? A sole proprietorship, this is basically just formed when you start a business, right? You don't need to do anything additional. You don't need to register with the state or a different jurisdiction. You start business. This is you. If you have a thought or an idea or you're already progressing, this is where you're at, a sole proprietorship. A general partnership, and I'll get into some of the specifics here on these moving forward. C corporation and S corporation, this is dealing with taxes again, a designation for tax considerations, and a limited liability company. I'll get into the specifics of each one of these on the next few slides. We recommend, but you can form you can form your entity in any jurisdiction that you'd like. Why you hear Delaware all of the time is because it's the most robust law behind an entity formation. You can form one in Utah, you can form one in Arizona, you can form one in any jurisdiction that you choose. The reason why you hear Delaware is just because the law has been flushed out. It's old, everybody understands what is going to happen, and investors like Delaware entities. So, a sole proprietorship, this is the simplest form. This has already happened if you are running a business and you have not formed an entity. There's no documentation that is needed for this. There's only one individual owner, and a key distinction is you have all of the profit and loss responsibility on yourself. So this comes into the liability, the future of what you're trying to do. If you're looking to expand, you need to look at other entities. A general partnership. So this is also a simple entity organization. It's a partnership. When two people come together, two or more people come together with a desire to move forward with their business plan, they form a partnership. No entity documentation or registration with a local jurisdiction is needed. You can just come together and form a partnership and put a document together that governs what you would like to do. That's a general partnership. Now, you may have heard multiple jurisdictions have limited liability partnerships. That's another step, and that's a registration requirement. This, however, is just a general partnership. The entity that you're probably most familiar with, well, this and a limited liability company, is a C corporation. So this is a corporation. And we'll see later on that a capital stack, most investors would like to see this sort of an entity when you're raising funds. Some key distinctions: there are no limitations on the number of shareholders, owners of the company. You do have to file with the Secretary of State of the jurisdiction. So if you're organizing in Delaware, you need to file with the state of Delaware. And that process it's really simple. You can do it online, but there are documents that are required in order to effectuate that organization, your articles of organization. We'll talk a little bit more about the benefits of this, but issuing stock, either common stock or preferred stock, that's why a C corporation is what is typically required in order to raise funds into the future. An S corporation, let me jump back. A tax issue with a corporation is possible double taxation. The owner of the common stock or preferred stock will be taxed on an individual basis, but then also the corporation itself is taxed. So there's a double taxation. If it's a smaller corporation, you'll be taxed on both sides. And so an S corporation that's distinction. It's a corporation, but requires a designation, an S designation with the IRS. What it does is it makes it a pass-through corporation, so there's no longer that double taxation. You have the owners of the entity, the common ownership. They're not taxed on the entity level. It's taxed on the individual level coming through, and that's the S designation. It's a little bit more difficult to raise money in an S corporation. It's because there's only one class of common shares. A limited liability company, this is also something that you've likely heard of in the past. It is not a corporation. The governance is different. However, you still need to file with the jurisdiction that you're looking for. So it's typically limited liability companies are formed in the state that your board of directors or your members reside. So we do a number of limited liability companies in Utah. The owners and members have no limitation, but you issue membership interests in a limited liability company. The idea of a limited liability company is to obviously limit your liability, limit the liability of the individual, and try to have the entity itself take on as much of the liability of the company as possible without it passing through to the individual. So some of the key considerations, that's why limited liability companies were formed and the goal for using them in the future. A number of considerations when you're thinking about which entity to select and organize. Governance, future tax considerations, raising money. As I mentioned before, a C corporation is most typical for raising money in the future because of the ability to issue common shares, common stock, and preferred stock to investors who come into the future. If you're looking at an exit event, which we'll talk about a little bit further, understanding your goals, how soon you would like to exit the company, how you would like to raise money, all these considerations matter. And then the governance. So there are fiduciary obligations for individuals who form these different entities. If you form a C corporation, You're going to have statutory obligations on your governance and how you continue to operate. And that's compounded once money comes in, once you have investors or preferred stockholders. So understanding the governance, what you're able to do, who you have on your team really matters on which organization that you choose. A few more items to consider. Who and what, your different titles. You have officers and members. Members in limited liability companies, board of directors and officers in corporations. And then a few considerations on governance. So role of board of directors. So we're talking about a C corporation or an S corporation now. So if you form this entity, then your governance matters. You need to form a board of directors. Typically for a startup or at the beginning, a board of directors is the founder, possibly some of the founder's mentors. You need to have experience. You need to have people who know how to counsel because you have choices that will need to be made early on, and governance obligations, especially when investors come in. You will need to be able to show that you are acting within the business plan and the entity's formation and rules. You need to act ethically and with good business judgment. Be able to show business judgment typically through experience. So when you're considering forming your board of directors, have some diversity and have experience. And this will help with attracting investors and being able to continue with the governance of the entity as it moves forward. Remember, depending on the position and the obligations of the corporation, there are absolutely legal fiduciary obligations. You have to understand what your role is, and you have to understand who you are answering to. Even if you are the CEO, CFO, founder, once you've formed an organization and you have accepted those responsibilities, you have obligations to that entity, and then you must fulfill them. Additional roles of the board of directors: selecting your executive team. Typically, you'll see that the founder sits on the board of directors, becomes the CEO, but however, you should consider thinking about other individuals, people in your network with experience and ability in order to help direct the entity as it's moving forward. You need to have a corporate strategy. Be clear, the file matters. Put information together, put your business plan together, put it in the file, and then uphold those obligations and responsibilities. You have a business judgment rule on the law. As long as you are exercising your business judgment rule and you're following these duties that you've set for yourself, then you're in a good space in your entity. Okay, so if you breach that obligation, or if you breach that right, or if someone comes in and is able to show that you did not follow a precise business judgment, then that's when you get into liability, and that's when you have problems for this board of directors. You're identifying the progress moving forward. I said this before, but I'm going to once again. Keep the paperwork intact. Build the file. Put your goals together. Put the entity's goals together. Build the governance, and then follow it. The board of directors is responsible for doing that. The CEO, CFO, other executive suite members are responsible for doing that. And the way that you show it is through actions, but also the file. Put it down on paper. Put your business plan on paper, and the steps that you will be taking in order to effectuate that business plan on paper. Because if you do, that shows that business judgment. Capital formation. We touched on this quite a bit, but the reason why you choose the entity and why a C corporation is typically the most common, because you're able to issue common shares and preferred stock. And this creates the ability for you, looking into the future, to raise money and to be able to effectuate an exit. Common shares are typically those ownership interests that are owned by the founders, the individuals who are first at the bottom level that come into the entity. They put in their sweat equity, possibly some friends and family that come in, you issue common shares. Investors will be looking for an opportunity to purchase or invest in preferred stock. And that can have many different vehicles. Preferred stock is this is why C corporations are typically used for this sort of an investment, because preferred stock can have a number of different approaches. It can have voting rights. It can only be an equity interest. However, it comes down in the waterfall. So preferred stock usually gets paid out, or does get paid out, before a common share or a common stock would be paid out, and that's why that's important. Some different funding types, and I'm sure you have a few other individuals who are talking about this more specifically. But bootstrapping, that's typically where at the beginning of an entity or an idea, funded by your own pocket, essentially. Friends and family then come in, and this is the common stock area of a C corporation. Typically, you'll issue common stock to yourselves or to your friends and family to get things started. Angels or super angels then come in, and depending on the structure that you set up with your angels or your super angels, they will either be common stock or preferred stock with different routes. Since we're running out of time quickly, I'll skip over this and highlight some of the different ways to raise the money. Convertible note. It's a note. It's a debt given to the company with the option to convert into equity shares into the future. That's a preferred equity share. A safe or a simple agreement for future equity. This is one of the best approaches for a budding company because it's not debt. It's a contractual right. So you borrow money, you get the money, and then depending on a subsequent event, typically an exit, that non-debt, that loan that's not secured by a note, it can then be converted into equity. And so this is typically an avenue for an investor to be able to purchase future equity at a discount rate, typically around 20%. There are multiple considerations when raising money. The securities laws in the United States of America are robust to help protect investors and companies. So before you raise money, make sure that you understand or talk to somebody about how best to handle that. And then exit events. Again, when you're considering going back and deciding which entity to form, think into the future. Do you want to be out in 5 years? Do you want to be out in 1? Would you like to run your organization as the president or CEO into the foreseeable future? Or would you like to bring someone else in to do that? Do you have the idea and someone else needs to run it? Or are you both? All of these thoughts and considerations at the very beginning really matter on which entity you choose and which legal protections you'd like to effectuate. It's an exciting time. Entities are wonderful, and there's a lot of protections and legal protections and considerations that come throughout. So thank you very much.